Welcome to the deep dive. Okay, so we've all felt it, right? That pit in your stomach, the heart kind of racing, those thoughts that just spin out of control before something big happens. We call it anxiety, sure, but like, do we really get the inner workings, the actual, nuts and bolts of what's going on with that feeling? Today, we're doing a deep dive into exactly that. We're drawing on some really incredible insights from David A. Clarke's book. This is what anxiety looks like. It feels like time to, well, unpack this.
Yeah, and what's really fascinating about this book, this source material, is how it approaches it. It takes these incredibly relatable stories, really vivid stories of people struggling with different parts of anxiety. And this is the key part. It pairs them with evidence-based cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT solutions.
Right. CBT.
Exactly. So our goal here in this deep dive is to basically give you a shortcut to distill the most important stuff so you can understand the specific mechanisms and the targeted solutions for anxiety. But, without feeling totally overwhelmed by theory, the book really zeroes in on discovering what drives your anxiety. And it gives you those relatable stories, targeted solutions, and CBT skills for lasting relief. It's really quite something, a great resource.
Okay, so let's start right at the beginning then. Get that foundation. What is anxiety really at its core? The source defines it as anticipating some kind of threat or danger, either to ourselves or, people we love. And it points out these two things you just can't deny about it. First, it's a distressing emotion. I think we can all agree on that one. But second, and maybe this is more important for our discussion, it involves all of us, our whole being. It changes how we think, how we feel, and crucially, how we act. I mean, think about it, right? Whether it's something physical you're worried about, like getting sick, or maybe something psychological, like being totally embarrassed, anxiety isn't just a feeling. It kind of takes over everything.
It absolutely does. And the book, it really breaks this down further. It talks about four key components, and they're all interconnected, right? They all feed into each other to create that anxiety experience. So first, you have the feelings, that tension, the nervousness, maybe apprehension. Like imagine you get an email about a presentation you haven't prepared for. Boom. Instantly you feel stressed, maybe fearful, even a bit irritated. It's that immediate emotional hit.
Yeah, that instant reaction. I think everyone listening knows that feeling. It happens so fast.
Exactly. Then second, you've got the thoughts. When we're anxious, our minds just get, well, preoccupied with threats, potential threats. We tend to blow things out of proportion, exaggerate how likely bad stuff is, how severe it'll be. We can spiral into catastrophic thinking.
Catastrophic thinking, yeah.
Like the example of the young mom dropping off her baby at daycare. Her mind is just flooded, right? Is she crying? Are they taking care of her? Am I a bad mom? All those worries. Or Michelle in the book, who just sees problems everywhere. Or Gina, who's terrified of panic attacks in public. Or Dwayne, constantly imagining making a fool of himself. This focus on the negative, it isn't just a side effect. It actively drives the anxiety. Think about dental anxiety. Lots of people get nervous, sure.
Yeah.
But someone with intense fear thinks the pain will be unbearable or they'll be trapped. Those thoughts directly shape the feeling, making it way worse.
Wow, yeah. It's really striking how tightly linked those are. So if our thoughts are such a huge part of it, what makes them so hard to shift, according to the book?
Well, the tricky part is that these thoughts often feel like, absolute facts. They feel like the truth. Sometimes they're so automatic we don't even notice them, let alone question them.
Yeah.
And that often leads us to the third component, which is physical sensations. This is often the most undeniable part for people, and frankly, the most intolerable for many.
Right.
This is that hyperarousal of our nervous system, the whole fight or flight response kicking in. We're talking increased heart rate, maybe chest tightness, feeling short of breath, dizzy, nauseous, muscles tensing up. Your body is mobilizing. And these physical feelings can be so distressing, so intense, that people often look for immediate relief. Sometimes medication, sometimes, unfortunately, things like alcohol, just to make the physical feelings stop.
Okay, so we've got the feelings, the thoughts spinning out, the body reacting. What's the last piece? What do we do when we're anxious?
That brings us to the fourth component, actions. This is where you see things like escape, avoidance, or frantically searching for safety. And this ties right into what the book calls the anxiety cycle. You've got a situation, maybe a difficult one, you interpret it as threatening, that leads to anxiety.
Okay.
And then that anxiety drives you to escape or avoid the situation entirely. And that avoidance, that's where it gets really problematic. Take a job interview, for example. Person A feels intense anxiety, cancels it, even though they want the job. Why?
Yeah.
Because they see the interview as a threat.
Hmm.
They think, I'll mess up, I'll freeze, they'll see I'm anxious.
Right.
That thinking ramps up the anxiety, leads to avoidance. Now, person B, also anxious, goes anyway, gets the job. Their thinking, totally different. Okay, lots of people get anxious. I've handled anxiety before. Worst case, I don't get this job.
Oh.
See, that's where something like CBT comes in. It helps people change that thinking, develop coping skills so they can tolerate the anxiety and still do things, instead of letting avoidance run the show.
That job interview example really nails it. How the same feeling leads to totally different outcomes based on how you handle it. So, if anxiety isn't just one monolithic thing, how does the book start breaking down these different ways it shows up and, importantly, the specific solutions?
Yeah, that's crucial because even with those core components we talked about, the thoughts, feelings, body, actions, anxiety really does manifest differently for everyone. And the book does a fantastic job of showing this through specific stories and then linking them to very targeted, unique solutions.
Okay, let's dive into the first one then. Anticipatory anxiety. The book uses Jessica's story for this. Jessica's described as shy, introverted, 17, and she has this intense anxiety anticipating leaving for college. The moment she got her acceptance letter, months before she'd even leave, she had a full-blown anxiety attack. Her thoughts just spiraled into catastrophe, convinced she'd be anxious nonstop, terribly homesick, orientation would be a social disaster, everyone would think she's a weirdo, she'd get sick, feel totally fragile, and just debating whether she should even go just made the anxiety worse and worse. It fed itself.
Right? Classic anticipatory anxiety. And for this, CBT offers, well, 3 really powerful strategies. First is practice realistic thinking. This is about actively focusing on actual evidence. Why are those worst-case scenarios like total disaster at college? Why are they actually unlikely? And why are more realistic, manageable outcomes more probable? It's about consciously pulling your attention away from that negative rumination towards a more balanced perspective. Second, maximize coping potential. This means making a specific plan, a coping plan for managing the anxiety and the social stuff before the event happens. So for Jessica, that might mean practicing conversation starters or how to be assertive or just communication skills generally. And here's a really profound insight from the book. Practicing these skills when you feel that anticipatory anxiety, not when you're calm, actually builds more confidence for when the real situation comes along.
Okay, practicing while anxious. That's interesting. So you practice realistic thinking, you build up your coping plan. What's the kind of deeper mental shift needed for someone like Jessica?
The third strategy is about fostering an anxiety acceptance mindset. This involves, first, validating the feelings, telling yourself, look, this is natural. Anyone would be anxious about such a big change. Then recognizing that pattern of thinking anxiously about the future. And then this is key, setting limits on it, deciding, okay, I'm not going to let myself spiral on this for hours. This is often the hardest part, but it's also the most liberating. It's not about trying to eliminate the anxiety altogether. It's about learning to, well, coexist with it while still moving forward. It lets you live more in the present, even with those anxious feelings.
That idea, accepting the anxiety, that sounds really key. But what happens when the anxiety itself becomes the main thing you're afraid of? Let's talk about Chandra's story now, which gets into this fear of anxiety itself. Chandra was, successful, confident, but then she had a panic attack and everything changed. She got completely gripped by the fear of having another attack. She believed anxiety could just escalate, become this uncontrollable, severe emotional state she couldn't handle. So she started focusing intensely on her feelings, her physical state, waking up, immediately checking in, how do I feel? Which of course just created this self-fulfilling prophecy. It made her more anxious, more volatile.
Yeah. The fear of fear. It's a tough cycle. So to tackle this, the source lays out some specific strategies. First one is rethink anxiety. Chandra had started seeing anxiety as this, dangerous, destructive force. The goal here is to fundamentally shift that view, to see anxiety instead as a normal emotion, one that fluctuates, that you can manage and adapt to, just like sadness or anger. Actually doing self-monitoring, like tracking her anxiety levels through the day, helped her see it wasn't this constant, overwhelming thing. It was more like a wave, it would ebb and flow.
Changing the story you tell yourself about anxiety, that sounds powerful, but how hard is that to actually do when you feel like you're panicking?
Oh, it's definitely not easy. It's a skill you have to build over time. And that leads right into the second strategy, counter self-fulfilling prophecy. This means actively changing your predictions. Instead of thinking, I'm going to have intolerable anxiety, it's going to ruin my day, you shift to something like, okay, I'll probably experience some anxiety today, different levels at different times, and I'll cope with it. It's about learning to keep your focus on the task at hand, rather than getting totally fixated on the anxious feelings, gently bringing your attention back to what you're doing in the present. So Chandra learned she can actually live effectively, do things even while feeling anxious, instead of letting the feelings drag her down into more worry and avoidance.
Okay, our next deep dive is into something called emotional reasoning. Antonia's story really brings this to life. So, emotional reasoning. And that's when you take your feelings, fear, anxiety, worry, as direct proof that there's a real threat out there. The book uses the example of flying anxiety. The engine's power down a bit after takeoff, you feel scared, and you immediately think, oh no, something's wrong, even though it's totally routine.
Standard procedure.
Right. But for Antonia, her whole life was kind of dominated by this. She misread her emotions constantly and avoided tons of things because she followed her feelings without question.
Yeah, feeling equals fact. It's a common trap. For emotional reasoning, the source gives 3 corrective strategies. First up is attentional shift. This just means deliberately broadening your focus. Instead of being zoomed in on your internal feelings, you pay attention to your external surroundings. So Antonia learned to do this in, say, a crowded supermarket. She noticed her physical sensations, sure, but then consciously described details outside herself. Okay, I notice the air conditioning feels cool. I'm looking at the fruit, checking if it's fresh. I see other shoppers moving around. It sounds simple, but this subtle shift helps undermine the fear because it grounds you in objective reality rather than letting you get lost inside your head.
That attentional shift. Yeah, I can see how that would ground someone. Once you've kind of shifted your focus outwards, what's the next step in evaluating things?
Good question. That leads to the second strategy: investigate and evaluate. While you're paying attention to your environment, you actively look for signs of actual threat versus signs of safety. So Antonia might notice some loud teenagers or maybe a man who looks angry, and that makes her feel uneasy.
Right.
But then she deliberately searches for safety signals. The security guard walking around calmly, the staff just doing their jobs, maybe some elderly people shopping without any apparent fear. She weighs the evidence and concludes, okay, safety seems like a better match for reality here. My fear is probably a false alarm. It's recognizing the feeling isn't necessarily reflecting the facts.
And okay, once you've decided it's a false alarm, what's a final crucial step to really break that emotional reasoning cycle?
The third strategy is the plan of action. This is key. Once you've made that assessment, okay, this fear is a false alarm, the next move is to take actions that are the opposite of avoidance. For Antonia, this meant changing her driving habits. She started making herself look further ahead, increasing her speed slightly, passing slower cars, even driving in heavier traffic sometimes, all things her fear told her not to do. By acting against that emotional reasoning bias, she basically proved to herself, through experience, that the fear wasn't a reliable guide. It weakens the fear's grip over time.
Makes sense. Acting against the feeling. Okay, our final deep dive for today is excessive reassurance seeking. And we see this through Maya's story. Maya worried, well, incessantly, about everything. Missing her aerobics class, problems in her marriage, finances, you name it. And her way of coping was to constantly seek reassurance from friends, from family, asking things like, will I be okay? Do you think this will turn out all right? But as the book points out, this only gave her temporary relief. And in the long run, it actually reinforced her anxiety. Plus, it started to annoy the people she kept asking. It becomes this real vicious cycle, doesn't it? The anxiety makes you seek reassurance. You get a brief moment of calm, then doubt comes back, anxiety spikes, and you need more reassurance.
Exactly. It's a classic loop. So to break free from that, the source outlines some really important strategies. First is changing conviction. Maya basically had to confront her own belief, her deep conviction that reassurance actually works. She had to recognize its futility, see the negative impact. And here's the really radical insight. The very thing she was doing to ease her anxiety, seeking reassurance, was actually making it worse. It was accelerating it.
Wow.
Reassurance gives that temporary fix, yeah, but it reinforces avoidance. I can't handle uncertainty. You can push people away, and ultimately it just fuels the anxiety and worry. She had to see that whether she was asking about flying alone or how she did on a test or big life decisions, the reassurance wasn't actually solving the underlying uncertainty. It's like believing that if enough people agree with you, it makes a future outcome more certain. It doesn't work like that.
That is a really tough truth to face, isn't it? That your comfort blanket is actually fanning the flames. So how does the book suggest you break that habit? It must be so ingrained.
It is deeply ingrained. Which leads to the second strategy, and this one takes real courage. Declare reassurance seeking. This works best in close, trusted relationships. The idea is that Maya could actually tell her partner, for instance, exactly what she wanted to hear. Like saying out loud, okay, what I want you to say is that you're definitely not having an affair, you will never cheat on me, you're completely committed, and our relationship will never, ever change.
Ah, okay.
By actually articulating that impossible ideal, it kind of exposes the charade, really, of reassurance seeking. It makes it useless because obviously her partner can't honestly guarantee the unknowable future like that. It makes it really awkward and difficult to keep playing that game, which helps force a shift away from seeking that impossible certainty.
Okay, so pulling all of this together, what does this mean for you listening right now? We've gone through how anxiety, yeah, it's common, we all feel it, but it has these deeper drivers. And once you understand them, you can start to address them with these targeted CBT strategies. The thread connecting all these stories is Jessica's anticipatory anxiety, Chandra's fear of the feeling itself, Antonia's emotional reasoning, Maya needing constant reassurance. It seems to be about the incredible power you have to change how you think, how you interpret things, and how you respond to the anxiety. It's about more than just feeling better, isn't it? It feels like it's about getting back some control.
Absolutely. And maybe this raises an important question for you to think about. This whole journey towards emotional health, it really seems to be about gaining new insights, yes, but also building practical skills. So instead of focusing only on eliminating anxiety, what if the most powerful step is actually learning how to tolerate it, learning to sit with it, and learning to actively challenge the distorted ways it makes you see things? Maybe think about which of these pieces of the anxiety puzzle we talked about today felt most relevant to you. Because there really is so much hope in knowing that you can reclaim the parts of your life that anxiety might have taken. Whether that's, the freedom to travel or social confidence or just some basic peace of mind. It's worth remembering, the book, This Is What Anxiety Looks Like, has even more resources if you want to explore these CBT techniques more deeply.